Hey everyone, Sarah Peck here, and this is the Startup Pregnant Podcast. Today we get to talk to somebody who has been an entrepreneur for a long time. She has always wanted to be an independent entrepreneur and work for herself, in part because of the freedom and flexibility of creating the type of work and the type of lifestyle that appeals to her. Today we talk to Roeder. She is the founder and the CEO of Meet Edgar, which is a social media automation tool. And right now she's starting a new company, Roeder, and she's been an independent entrepreneur running different companies since she was 22. In 2009, she founded LKR Social Media, and she ran a social media training company that taught business owners about the power of social media marketing. From that, she was named one of the top 100 entrepreneurs under the age of 30, not just in 2011, but again in 2013 and 2014, and then was invited to talk about the power of entrepreneurship at the White House. She's also the mom to a young kiddo, and she's very soon welcoming her next kid into her life. Meet Edgar today is a $4 million company, and they have 30 or so employees. And one of the things we talk about today is how she built this company on the heels of her previous company and self-funded it. So in today's episode, I get to talk to her about bootstrapping, self-funding, and fundraising differences, like what each means and what it looks like, how to manage your time as an entrepreneur, and why she specifically did not create a business that requires late night work hours, not just for her, but for her entire team, including the engineers. She started her technology company while pregnant, which we talk about, and she planned ahead for maternity leave. So I ask her what kind of leave did she take and how did she set it up? And what does it mean to be pregnant while starting a company? What are the differences and expectations she has there? She also makes a really awesome point about not waiting to put your maternity leave policy in place until you have your first pregnant person, but actually getting it in place long before and why it's so important. And lastly, as somebody who loves her work, she talks about how she puts boundaries up so she can find her own rhythm, so she doesn't go always into the deep work area. And I totally identified with this at times. So for those of you that want to listen into this episode, it was a great one. I can't wait to bring it to you. Now, one quick heads up. There were a few internet glitches in the beginning. We actually tried to do this interview like 3 or 4 different times. So there's a couple of places where there's gaps in the recording, but bear with us. It's a little bit bumpy at times. We've smoothed as much of it out as we can. And the conversation is so good that I couldn't not bring this to you. Welcome to the Startup Pregnant Podcast, where we talk to creative leaders about what it means to be an entrepreneur and a parent. I'm your host, Sarah K. Peck. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Acuity Scheduling. If you haven't switched to a scheduler yet to help you with all the back and forth of figuring out appointments, I highly recommend trying it. Switching to a calendar scheduler changed my life and saved me so much time. So typically, Acuity offers a free 2-week trial if you want to give it a whirl, but for Startup Pregnant listeners, they have a 45-day trial for us. Go to acuityscheduling.com/startuppregnant and you'll get a 45-day trial. All right, everyone, we have Roeder on the show, and I'm so excited to welcome her. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Sarah.
You know, actually, I have a question that I want to start with, but I think this would be useful for people to listen to. Do you remember the story of how we first met?
I remember there was grilled cheese involved.
And like macaroni at the top of some like hotel bar, 4th floor thing. Is that correct?
There was definitely just like intense food bonding happening.
So this story comes to mind because it's really special to me because I remember I knew nobody at this conference that I showed up at, and I met a whole bunch of people, and you were one of the people I met, and you asked me, you're like, do you want to go get food? And I was like, sure. And we went and we got food, and I got to get to know you, and it was one of the things that really propelled my own entrepreneurial path. And so first of all, thanks.
You're welcome.
And second, for people listening, you know, when you're starting out and you're getting out there and meeting people, there's that awkward moment, and then there's that amazing moment where you get to have macaroni with a friend. So Laura, go ahead.
I remember that we were at, it was a business conference and you were wearing yoga pants.
Totally.
And I was like, you rock the yoga pants all the time, huh? You're like, these are my pants. These are the only pants I have. I might be at yoga. I might be at a conference. These are the pants that I wear. I'm like, you know what? I like this lady.
Yeah. I was like, why? Jeans are too complicated. No, it was definitely yoga pants at a conference. Yep. Correct. Okay. So Laura, for people who don't know you, can you go back in time and tell us a little bit about your work history and your entrepreneurship journey?
Yeah. So I started working for myself pretty young. I started working for myself full time when I was 22. I'm 33 now. So I had one job out of college as a junior graphic designer for about a year. And then that was the, highest job title I have achieved to date, junior graphic designer. So yeah, I quit that job to freelance design and create websites. And that evolved into social media marketing, consulting, and training. And then that evolved into a social media software business, which is what I do now. I run Meet Edgar, which is a SaaS business.
That was fast. You just covered that 11 years in like a snap. You lived in London for a little bit and you had built this whole agency around LKR social media, right?
Yeah, that was the social media training business.
Social media training. Which one was your first, first venture into entrepreneurship? Did you start with a consulting path and then build out a company from there? What was that like?
So I started design freelancing is the first, way that I supported myself with my own work full time. And I think freelancing is such a great place to start, freelancing, consulting, any kind of service business, because you get paid right away, right? You don't have to raise money to build a product. You give someone an hour of your time and they pay you for that hour. So it's a way to build a business, it's something easy to do on the side, a way to iterate really quickly. So yeah, that's how I started training. So it was creating online courses, one-to-many model as opposed to doing one-on-one training. So that's kind of where I learned to build a larger business beyond just my time. But Meet Edgar is the first business where I've had a larger team. So right now we're at about 30 people. We've been running for about 3.5 years. This is my first business where I'm I have a leadership team. I have a larger team. That type of business is definitely something that I'm still learning a lot about. Before it was just me or just me and one other person or a few other part-time freelancers, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. And LKR was based on your own name and you were training people and things that you knew how to do. And then you worked with a lot of contractors. Did you have full-time employees while you were building that company?
I did. I had one or two.
Mm-hmm. Did you establish it as an LLC?
S Corp.
S Corp. Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about how did the idea for Meet Edgar come about? When did you stop LKR social media to then build Meet Edgar?
Yeah, so the software evolved very organically out of the training. So in the training, I was teaching people to do manually the things that Edgar does for you. So with Edgar, all of your social updates are sorted into categories. They get shared and reshared over and over again. I was teaching people to do that manually with a spreadsheet and with copy and paste. Edgar is software that does that for you. So you don't have to store it in a spreadsheet and copy and paste yourself. And I ran the two businesses simultaneously for a while. So when I launched Edgar, I thought, okay, this will be a great complement because, once they take the training, they'll want the software. If they don't want the software, they can just have the training instead. That's what I thought I was going to do. And then after Edgar launched, it just took off so quickly. We hit $1 million in revenue 11 months after launch, and we were a bootstrapped company. So it had done so well that I decided I love this business model because my training company, like you said, it was my face. I was the teacher. It very much revolved around me. The software business, I'm not a developer. So if everything falls apart, I can't fix it. It's a business that by definition cannot just involve my time. I am somewhat useless in a lot of ways in this business. So I found for me, software was just a much better model that let me have, related to the mom stuff, a lot more freedom, a lot more flexibility. So I decided to shut down the training business. And that was a 7-figure business when I shut it down, but I wanted to go all in on Edgar.
There are so many pieces of this puzzle, and I'm going to pause for a second and back up and explain a little bit of what Meet Edgar does for people who have never heard of it. The way I think about it, and I use it as a tool, and they're a sponsor of some of our episodes, but the way that I think about it is I could go in and manually schedule all of my different tweets and posts and all the updates that I put on social media. And they built software similar to Hootsuite and other things, but it gets to repeat the content. So if you create evergreen stuff that lasts for a long time, they'll share it time and time again. So we use it for this podcast when I share episode 1 over and over again, like once a week, because there's plenty of new people coming to find out about the podcast all the time. Just to give some context. You have this big old spreadsheet and you are doing all this stuff manually and you're training people on how to do it and how to better use social media. And the idea for the software comes from a problem you have. You wrote something about how you bootstrapped this company and you funded it yourself. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah. So to be super accurate, the company is self-funded. So we had some money, some profits from my previous business. And I want to bring that up because I think sometimes bootstrapped can also mean you literally make $1, you spend $1, you make $1, you spend $1.
Right.
That's not the situation we were in. I just don't want anyone comparing themselves, being like, how did they build this whole software company with $0? We didn't have $0. We invested around 100 to 200,000 of profits in getting Edgar going. But that was all my own money earned from previous businesses. So I didn't fundraise. And that was a really deliberate decision because I was connected to that world. I was doing a SaaS, right? It's the type of business that you can raise money for. I have always been really big on the freedom angle of working for myself. I've always been very set with my work hours. I've never worked evenings, weekends. I like to travel a lot. This is a big reason why I work for myself, is to have that freedom and flexibility. And when I looked at raising money, I mean, maybe it's possible to find investors that are like, yeah, go traveling for a few months. Maybe the business will slow down a bit, but it's okay. It'll work out in the end. That's not really how investors are viewing their investment. Fair enough, right? And the way the model works also is that they need to get enormous returns. If you sell your company for $50 million, that's usually not a win for an investor. Maybe they just get their money back in that case. It often needs to be more of $100 million, going public. These types of scenarios is kind of the game that you're choosing to play if you take money. And the idea of building $100 million business with 500 employees plus is not exciting to me at all.
I think that's so interesting. And you said something that the tech people listening to our podcast will understand, but I want to pause and make sure we explain. What does SaaS mean?
Yeah, SaaS is software as a service. So basically it just means subscription software that you pay for every month.
So any subscription you sign up for that does something for you, a tool that you use, that's a SaaS business. And what does that mean for you as a business owner? Why is that such a cool thing?
Yeah, so it's a super amazing business model because your cash flow is really predictable and your cash flow is really even. So because people sign up, I mean, now we're at the size where we literally have at least one customer every day. And then those customers have monthly subscriptions. They stay various amounts of time. They don't stay forever, although I guess some of them do. We'll see. We've been around 3.5 years. We'll see how long they stick around. You're getting paid every month, right? So we literally are receiving money every day of the week. You make that sale at one point and then they keep paying you monthly. So from a business model perspective, it's a really amazing and can be a really lucrative business model.
That's so interesting. I love that you pointed out that you invested couple $100,000 of your own money into this business to build it. And that was self-funded through your previous business. So now you're at Meet Edgar and it took off right away. It took off faster than you expected. Can you talk about how did you build that initial team? You didn't build the technology yourself. How did you hire somebody? What did that look like?
Right. So my technical co-founder is my husband. So that's my hot tip. Marry a geek. Marry a geek. I mean, they're just great people all around. But yeah, so he built the initial version of the software and then he hired out the initial technical team. We kind of joke that he's uncredited co-founder. We don't call him co-founder because we were clear that we weren't going to be running the business together side by side. I was going to run the business. He's product side. He's building side. He didn't want to do all the business running. That part is fun for me, not fun for him. So he is my co-founder in the sense that, he built it and he still helps to advise and oversee all the technical stuff. It would be very challenging for me to hire a developer. Now we have a team of people that can do that, but he set that whole thing in motion. And of course, now we have a leadership team for the rest of the business as well. And a lot of those people were with us right from the beginning, like our head of operations, Sarah, our head of customer service, Christine, and now she's our head of customer service. Sarah was doing like project management. Now she's head of operations.
Can you tell us about your pregnancy and your parenting journey? Because along the way, you've been working as an entrepreneur, building your own consultancy, then starting this big company. How did you think about parenting amidst all of this and starting a family? Have you always known that you wanted to start a family?
I have always known that I did want to have kids at some point, and running my own business. This was a very clear goal in my mind for the past 10 years of running businesses is I want to have a business that also allows me to have time to be a mom, that allows me to take a lot of time off if I so choose. So over the years, I was moving more and more towards that point of, okay, I want a business that I can take off 3 months, 6 months if I want to, and the business can continue without me. And it was a problem that I really recognized in my training business because that business, it could go on maintenance mode for a few months without me, but the business wouldn't grow. It would be stagnant. So it was something that I was like, okay, this isn't quite the perfect thing for me. How can I keep improving to move towards this goal? So the software business is something that ticks those boxes. And for me, these pregnancy journey and startup journey are very closely intertwined because I was pregnant when Edgar launched. And so I knew that I was going to be on maternity leave within the first year of my startup, right? Which a lot of people will tell you, oh, that first year, you're going to be working 80-hour weeks. And, that first year, like, don't see your friends and family. So I would just like to publicly state on this podcast that is not the only way to do things. I took 3 months off, when my startup was less than a year old. That's actually when we crossed that first $1 million in revenue. I was on real maternity leave, really not at work. And then I worked part-time for the first year of my son's life. So the next 9 months after that, I was working part-time.
Wow, that's so incredible. And I love that you pointed that out. There's this script in people's heads that, oh, if you're pregnant, you can't do this. Or if you're running a company, it has to look this way. Or you have to get fundraising to do this. It's a theme that I'm hearing throughout all of this. You just said that you were pregnant when you launched and then you took maternity leave and you worked part-time. How did that work? How did you do that?
So I did it because I had other people that were doing stuff. And this is the thing, like when people are like, oh, when you're starting out, you're going to have to work 80 hours a week. Well, however many hours need to be done, you can slice that up lots of different ways. So if there's 80 hours of work to be done, you can do it in 1 week. Or you can do it in 2 weeks, and then it can take 40 hours a week. You can do it all yourself, or 2 people can do it, or 3 people can do it, right? And it will take less of each person's time. So to me, it's just ridiculous, this idea that like you have to put in this much time. It's always a choice, right? You can have 5 clients or you can have 1 client. Everything in your business is your choice. So the way that I was able to do it was to not do everything myself. And in retrospect, being pregnant at launch was this incredible blessing because it forced me to really level up how I was running the business. Because I'm like, I don't want to launch something that just like stalls out 6 months after we launch it. Like, that sucks. That doesn't sound fun. So it's like, okay, how can I make sure that this is going to keep going and keep growing while I'm gone? So I gave the other people on my team full decision-making power, right? So if you're in charge of customer service, you're not asking me about policies. You're not asking me who can have a refund. You're deciding that. You don't need to ask me that. Even things that I was more involved in the beginning, like marketing, it's just like, here's the plan. And then we have people to execute the plan, improve it, iterate on it. As long as you allow other people to execute and make decisions and improve things, yes, work has to get done, but there's no reason that you as the founder have to be the one doing that work.
Was that a mindset that you were able to adopt really easily, or is that something you've had to learn over time?
That is something I very actively worked towards over the years. Like I had been running businesses for a long time. I'd been getting better and better at not doing everything myself. So I think with Edgar, it was just kind of this experiment where I'm like, you know what? I don't want to do everything myself. I'm going to try this out and see how it goes. And it's still a journey. I mean, especially the marketing. For me, that's my background. So that's been the hardest part to totally let go of or to find the right leadership for. Right now, I'm running the marketing department myself, in addition to being the CEO of the company. And we've had that look, a few different ways over the years. So it's a continuous journey, but I just knew that I didn't want to have to be responsible for everything and do everything myself. And I wanted to be able to say, hey, I'm going to work part-time for a while and still have this company that's thriving.
And so how long was your maternity leave? How much time did you take off completely? And then what did it look like when you came back?
So I talked to a lot of mom entrepreneur friends. If, this podcast had been around, I would have listened to every episode of this podcast. And I just asked them all for advice. What they universally told me was tell your team that you're going to take more time because you can always come back early. I think it's really hard to predict what you're going to feel like after you have a baby. I was going to say your first baby, but honestly, from what I've heard, they're all different. Who knows? And also maybe you'll have health problems. Maybe your baby will. You just have no idea what's going to happen. They're like, take 3 months. If you want to come back at 2 weeks, sweet. But if you tell your team you're going to be 2 weeks and then you want 3 months, and you haven't planned for it, that's going to cause problems. So as an American, 3 months was kind of all I could wrap my head around. My husband's British, so I'm sure he thought that was a really short amount of time. But I'm like, okay, I'm going to do 3 months fully off. And I did. So I had 3 months where I was not working at all. And for me, I found that during that newborn time, it wasn't like I was dying to go back to work. It also wasn't like I was loving not working. For me, the experience was I just felt so brain dead that I was like, I just can't even consider this one way. I don't know what I want. I don't know what's going on. I can't think about anything. I was just very drained and exhausted. So I was definitely glad I had given myself that time. It would have been very challenging for me to try to do any kind of serious work sooner than that.
And for people who have never been pregnant before or been a parent, why is that?
Because it's you're doing manual labor 24 hours a day. And me and my husband did pretty 50-50, by the way. A lot of people have it a lot harder than I do. But, if you're breastfeeding any amount of time, there's just a lot of time where the baby has to be with you. And they eat a lot during
first few months. Oh, Laura, this won't surprise you at all. But my mother told me, and I didn't get it until after I had Leo. She was like, you know how babies eat every 3 hours? I was like, yeah. She's like, you ate every hour and a half on the dot. And I was like, oh, Mom, I'm so sorry.
Well, I remember hearing that 3-hour thing when I was pregnant and kind of even though I read it everywhere, I was kind of like, that can't be right. I was because I couldn't imagine it because they were every 3 hours, not just during the day, but for a while it's every 3 hours, 24 hours. I just couldn't fathom it. I had just never done anything that required me to do a physical task every 3 hours for months around the clock. It just sounded insane. It's one of those things that's hard to wrap your head around until you go through it.
1,000%. So I love that kind of retrospective advice to other people as well. You got this advice from other women, which is just plan for more time. And then if you take less, great. Because, as a systems thinker, it's which one gives you the better the outcome? Oh, the one where there's more and then you cut it short is much easier to deal with because then you've also created a plan and you've assigned people tasks and you have a better process in place. So you took 3 months off. Then what did it look like coming back to work?
So coming back to work, like I mentioned, I was part-time. So in our case, I'm trying to remember how the logistics worked out. I think we had a nanny, half days at our house. And then my husband and I would kind of trade off the rest of the time. So I was working from home. So I know a lot of moms that are just strap the baby on, get to work, no problem. Sometimes even a week after they just can do it. For me, I found that I had to have a really clear separation between mom time and work time. I found it super stressful to try to work during nap and then, the baby wakes up early and you're halfway through your stuff. I found it really stressful to try to work while baby was, laying on the floor staring at something or whatever they do when they're 6 months old. That did not work for me at all. So I found what I needed was knowing that my husband was on call or nanny was on call so I could just be totally devoted to work for that 4-hour period.
Now you run a company that's got, how many people did you say? Up to 20?
30
people. So you now need to have a maternity leave policy of your own. How does that work? And when did you implement that at your company and what does it look like?
So I think from launch I don't remember if we had just 1 month paid for mothers or if we had 1 month paid for both at launch. We had a little something at launch, which by the way, I've read articles that are once we had our first pregnant employee, we started maternity leave. And I just got to say, that's way too late because when women are evaluating your company, you don't have a maternity leave and you don't know what candidates you're missing out on. Them being or men too, right? For paternity leave. So yeah, don't wait until someone's pregnant and then be like, oh, pregnant lady, like, what do we do? What do we do? Like, don't make her figure it out. Make whoever's supposed to figure that out, figure it out. So what we have now is we have 2 months paid leave for what we call primary caregiver, and then we have 1 month paid for secondary caregiver. That's really, really challenging as a small business. So right now we do have someone who's off on maternity leave. With our team size, there's no one else to like replace her, right? Because everyone's basically, for most roles, they're the only person doing their job. It's not like, oh, we have the senior and then the mid-level and then like the junior and then the intern for every role. Like most people, it's just them. So I know why it's so challenging for small businesses to get maternity leave policies in place, because to be totally honest, you are like just sort of floundering a bit while they're gone. Like for her, a lot of her stuff isn't totally getting done. Like other people are just sort of pitching in to cover. But you know what? Like we're surviving and everything hasn't fallen apart and it's not the end of the world. And the value that she brings to the company long term is so worth the struggle that we're experiencing for these 2 months.
1,000%. And I think it's such a hard challenge because yes, we should all have maternity leave policy, but then the burden is also on small businesses to try to figure it out when they're a team of 4 to 6 people. And it's one of the reasons why most societies in the world have figured this out, not the States, for how to create paid leave for not just one parent, but 2 parents.
Right.
You said earlier, your husband is British and 3 months, he was like, what? Like 3 months is the 2 weeks. In most other countries. Yeah. Like they're just like, why would you only take 3 months? It's like your baby can't even like move yet. It's barely like bubbling and gurgling. Like it might have smiled at you once, but that might have been gas.
Right.
What was your experience of becoming a parent? What was that like for you?
I always say it's so much harder than running a startup, and people are like, haha, but I'm like, it's not a joke. And I know a lot of women listening will be able to identify with that sentiment. Like, I've been running companies a while. It's something I really enjoy. It's a skill that comes really naturally to me. Parenting has not come as naturally to me. And it's also something that's just new, right? Like I'm doing it for the first time. I'm learning it all for the first time. People will be like, oh, being a mom is the hardest job in the world. And it's become this sort of platitude, right? Or it's like, I think it's a little bit dismissive when people say that, like, it's the hardest job in the world. But I'm like, no, it's so hard, especially if you're a full-time stay-at-home mom. Like there's so many partners out there that's what their, usually wife does. They've never done it. They just deeply do not get like that you don't get a break. That it is like literally a 24-hour job with no break. And how cushy it is to be able to go to an office, chat with other adults, get some coffee, stroll down the hallway with no one like grabbing you. To me, like work is such a luxury compared to like parenting a small child every day. Is obviously has its beautiful moments, but it's just like very taxing.
Yeah, that no breaks thing is real. I remember when my kid turned 1 and I was like, well, 365 days waking up at 5:30.
Right.
He doesn't know what Christmas is. Like he has no clue. There's no weekend. Like he's like, oh, it's another day. Good morning. And you're like, oh, that's hard. It is really hard. You're right about the platitude. It's not helpful. What has made your parenting journey easier or more sane? Like what tools have you brought in to support yourself as a parent?
Well, I mean, a famous thing in Sheryl Sandberg's book is the importance of your partner. And then, of course, she experienced, the loss of her partner and got to see firsthand how hard that is. If you're in a situation where you have an amazing partner, I mean, that's the number one thing you can do to ease the burden. If you're not in that situation, like surround yourself with nannies and grannies and friends and whatever. I mean, we all need to do this, right? Even if we have a great partner, the idea that you can't do it alone. And I know I'm not the first one to talk about when you have a kid, you really realize what a weird society we've built for ourselves and how strange it is to be like a single woman staring at a single baby laying on the floor. If you have a friend over, it's way more fun. Or if there are 2 babies laying on the floor, it's way more fun. Like it's definitely not meant to be done in isolation, but that's the lives that many of us have set up for ourselves, including myself, right? Like now I live in the same city as my parents, but I don't live in the same house as them, the way it's still done in most places in the world where you have a larger extended family. So I think you really realize when you have kids what an isolated life that you live, and you kind of try to do your best to make it less that way.
I think that's so well put. Actually, motherhood almost like brings to life, it brings to awareness the fact that our society is really weird. Like what we've built is really weird. There's so much about it that's strange. And I live in a city and I look around or I imagine like through the walls because there's a neighbor living probably like 5 feet over there, right? Because I live in a teeny apartment in New York City. There are probably hundreds of women inside of individual apartments with single babies, and the networks, the infrastructure to connect them just seem like they're not really there. It's so weird. And I always dream of, and part of this is like the communist hippie in me, I think, but I always dream of like, what if we had a network of parents and people that like we all rotated and took the babies for a day? Or like, there's just so much. I think as an entrepreneur, you probably also think about these things. There's so much ripe for disruption, pardon the phrase. There's so much potential for change. Do you think that you adopt any strategies or systems or tools that are different than the average bear? Like, what do you do that people tell you like, wow, I didn't know things could be done that way?
I mean, one thing I do is this is sort of a weird way to put it, but like deprioritize work to like a maybe somewhat shocking degree. And for me, that's because of how much I love to work. I really enjoy working. I would do it all the time. It's my favorite thing to do. So because that's my nature, I find that I need to have limits for myself, like not just for the workday, which I do. Like right now I work from about like 9:30 to about 4:30, often see my family at lunchtime too. I have this idea, like if I get an offer to do something else, I will take it. So like if a friend invites me to a movie during the day, because like they're also a freelancer, like I will take it. If my husband's like, we're doing something fun at home, he watches our son in the afternoon right now, like we're doing something fun, like you should come home. I like have to say yes. And I find that the world keeps going, you know, like you can take that hour away, your business keeps going, the world keeps turning. We also travel a lot. So we took a month-long family vacation to Japan earlier this year, which is like, well, I guess unusual for anyone with a 2-year-old and even more unusual if you're like running a startup and have a 2-year-old. But we're like, we want to go to Japan. We also run a startup and have a 2-year-old, but we want to go. So we're going to do it. And I think just putting those things in the calendar, making it happen, you find ways for your business to fit in around it.
I love that. I identify with that in as much as like work can expand to fill the time that you have. And I love the work that I do so much. And then I'm constantly like, but I need all 24 hours to do the work. It's not about implementing the quote unquote work-life balance things for your whole life. It's like, which one of these things is not like the other? Which one of these things actually needs the boundaries?
Right.
That's really an interesting way of looking at it. And I have long admired one of the ways that you work. You've always had a commitment to keeping a sane schedule in many regards. Talk to me about the hours of Meet Edgar. What does the company look like and how they keep hours and work? And what does it look like for all the other employees?
Yeah. So we have 40-hour work weeks, which sadly is like a huge point in recruiting, especially for our engineers, because it's very unusual in software startups for engineers in particular to have 40-hour work weeks, or they have 40-hour work weeks sometimes, except when we're crunching, is like how it often is. It's like, oh yeah, we have 40-hour work weeks, but of course, like not during crunch times. Then you have to work more. The thing is, like the nature of our business is that we determine everything. So we're a one-to-many business. We have 7,000 small business customers instead of like 3 enterprise customers. So all of our deadlines are self-imposed, right? You know, it's not like a client is demanding something for this Friday and they've paid us $100,000 to do it. Like we update the software, we improve the software, like we make our own schedule. So if we're saying, oh, everyone has to work double time this week to finish it this Friday, it's like I said, well, let's just do it next Friday instead so that everyone can work a normal time frame. We're also a remote team, so everyone works from home, but we're all in North America. So I think like the dirty secret of remote work is that it often means 24/7 work. If you have an international team, it means someone somewhere is having meetings in the middle of the night, in the evening, before work, in the morning. Like that's just how it has to be if you have an international team. So I think often remote sounds really compelling and really amazing, but sometimes it can actually be like worse in regards to work-life balance. So we have a remote team, but we're all in North America. So we all work normal hours. So basically we all work, 9 to 5-ish hours. So you can shift that a little earlier or a little later wherever you are so that we can work together without anyone having to work weird hours.
That makes a lot of sense. And you guys, for the most part, have been able to stick to those hours. Have you ever had a time when you go later?
I feel like people are not going to believe this, but like we really don't, because we really enforce it. So like if it does happen that someone, like if we see someone on Slack after their hours, like we'll message them publicly and be like, hey, like it's 4:00. Like we have on our Slack what our work day is. Some people are like 7 to 3. So we're like, you said you were going home an hour ago, go home. So they're like, okay. People at our company genuinely do not get emails in the evening, do not get emails on the weekend. It's just our culture. We just don't do that.
That's amazing. I love the idea that parenting actually gave you some of these boundaries in some regards. It's like, oh, this is what it is. And I'm going to have to adopt that rule. When a friend invites me to a movie in the middle of the day, I should say yes. That's a good rule.
Yeah, exactly. Like, see what happens. It's going to be fine.
Okay. So then what comes to mind for me, and I wonder if listeners are thinking about this too, one thing that I think that people who maybe haven't had the success that you've had struggle with when they're back at the very beginning, or they don't have the cash in the bank. Some of these things that we're talking about can seem like, well, gosh, that's great for you, Sarah, for you, Laura, but that just doesn't work for me right now. I don't have the luxury of choosing what I do. I don't have the time luxury or the financial luxury. Can we wander into that space a little bit? Like, what about people for whom they have very, very little money, or they're starting a business on the side where they're working full-time already? What kind of advice and help do you have for people who are at the very beginning of this journey?
So, one, you have to get real about your own situation and not be resentful about it and not have fantasy about it. So like if you have 2 kids and you work a full-time job and you're starting a business on the side, you have a lot less time to devote to that business than someone who, doesn't have a full-time job and has no children. Like this is the reality that you're living in. So if you have like 2 hours a week to get your thing going, comparing yourself to people who have 80 hours a week to get their thing going is not going to do you any favors at all. Like don't do it. It's not helpful. So, that's one. And 2, I do think you can make smarter choices from the beginning about what you're crafting. So I have one friend who just launched her own business, quit her job to do it full time. She has a kid who's about 2 that I don't know what her official work hours are, but they're definitely part-time-ish. And she's a consultant and she priced herself from day one so that she could farm out the work. And that sounds so obvious, but I told her, I'm like, I've literally never met anyone else who's done that. Like everyone does that like 5 years later. Like they make themselves as cheap as possible on day one. And then 5 years later, they're like, I can't take the stress anymore. I'm going to raise my price so someone else can do it. She just started that way from the beginning. She's like, oh, I don't have time to do all this work. What can I do? I'll have other people do the work and then I'll charge more so I can afford to pay for them. Like it's business 101. But there's this mindset thing that a lot of people think they're not allowed to do that from the beginning. But like Eva's doing it. So I know it can be done.
I love that. And I love that even like to play that example out with the person who has 2 hours a week. So you have 8 hours a month. What do you have to charge at 8 hours a month to be equal to your full-time job? Like go there, go to the crazy part or double your full-time job. And that might sound like terrifying. Or I know that 10 years ago, I would have giggled at that and been like, I can't do that. But what if you could? That's a really interesting exercise. Okay. So I guess my final questions for you. I'm going to do one on parenting and one on entrepreneurship. If you could go back and give yourself advice on entrepreneurship, tell your 18-year-old or 22-year-old self anything to do differently or do faster, what would you tell yourself?
The whole lesson of how to work with other people and have other people that you're not just delegating work to, but that are truly collaborating to build your business together. I think that's the secret to everything. That's the secret to your business being more successful. It's also a lot more fun, by the way, if you're not just in this alone, having to do everything yourself. And the cool part is you get to choose who you work with. So they're going to be really smart, awesome people, ideally, that you really respect and you really like. Like I mentioned, that's something, that I'm doing now that I'm continuing to do better. Like, man, if I could have just embraced that in year one, I don't know if that's possible, but like the faster you can get to this point, the more fun and accelerated everything becomes.
I love that. And if you could go back and tell yourself something about pregnancy and parenting, go back in time to the person that didn't have any kids and wasn't pregnant yet, what advice would you give yourself?
everything on the internet is made up. Like it's literally just a random person's opinion that they published on the internet, but you Googled it and you thought it was real. So one of the amazing things about my husband being from the UK is that the UK and the US don't have all the same parenting guidelines, yet the UK and the US both have extremely high rates of infant survival, right? So I know that they are both correct. For example, in the US right now, you are quote unquote not allowed to put a blanket on your baby. I don't know how you're supposed to keep the baby warm, but if you Google it, they say no blankets, no blanks on the baby. In the UK, you have to put a blanket on the baby, but you cannot swaddle them at night. In the UK, they're like, absolutely no night swaddling. The baby will drop dead. Don't do it. In the US, you have to swaddle the baby at night or they will never sleep. So it's great just having that contrast because you're like, okay, this is just something someone wrote on the internet. This is not actually instructions that I have to follow to a T for my baby to survive.
Oh my God, that's hysterical. It's so true. I was thinking about that the other day. Like everything on the internet is made up. Like even the way that business is done is made up, right? The way that parenting done, we're all making it up. I want to do another episode, and you're inspiring me to probably do it, about like all the hacks that people came up with for both parenting and entrepreneurship. But one of them I heard was my stepmom. She was like, in our day, we just pulled out a dresser drawer and that was the bed for the baby.
Right.
You just like stuffed a pillow in the bottom and like that was fine. You didn't need to buy a crib. Who buys a crib? And I was like, oh my God, I love you. So I have one more question. I said those were the two last questions, but there is one other topic that we will get into and we'll decide later if we air this or not. So in your parenting journey, can you talk a little bit about where you are right now at this moment?
Yeah. So I saw you put out something on Facebook the other day that said, I really want to talk to people who are really early in their pregnancy or parenting journey. So I shared with you that I am super newly pregnant. Like I just got my pregnancy test like 2 days ago. So not normally something I'd be sharing, but I'm like, you're allowed to air this if it's far enough in the future. So if you hear this, you know that that happened. So yeah, I'll be having number 2 at some point about 9 months from now.
Oh my gosh. Like it's so early that it's probably just sinking in for you.
Yeah.
Have you guys been talking about this for a long time? Is this something that you know you'd wanted?
Yeah. I mean, we've kind of like, we want more than one kid, but I think it took us till our son was like about 2 to be like, okay, I think we can do this, because like I mentioned, I just found the whole thing so challenging that I feel like I had to sort of like have a little time to recover before I could even think about like making the next one. So we did know that we wanted at least one more. It took us a little while to get over the shell shock and be like, okay, we really do want another one.
You're speaking straight to my soul right now. Samepage.com. We had a plan for a while. We were like, we're going to have 2 under 2. It's going to be great. And like Alex and I just look at each other with raised eyebrows like,
right.
Yeah, I'm not healed yet. Like, I haven't gotten enough sleep yet. It's going to be a while.
Yeah.
Laura, thank you so much for joining me. And it has been so great to hear your voice and have all of this on an episode. I know people are going to love it.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, just a reminder that if you want to learn more about the mastermind we're putting together for Startup Pregnant, it's an amazing community support space for women to connect with each other about entrepreneurship and parenting. We're doing the beta round this summer, so you can find out a lot more about the program over on our website, startuppregnant.com/mastermind. Get your name on the list so that I can send you information about it because we're putting together a small pilot group for a group of women this summer. We would love to have you there. And one more ask, if you are listening to this and you are enjoying all of these episodes, we are looking for more sponsors for the episodes. In particular, we are doing a campaign for listener-backed radio, which means you listening. If you want to contribute $5 or $10 a month because this podcast is meaningful and worth it to you, that actually makes a huge difference for us. We're doing a big campaign right now to keep going with all of our mini episodes, and we can't do it without you. We've got costs to cover and editors to pay for and a whole bunch of things that it takes to make this work. So This has been an experiment, the entire Startup Pregnant project. And if you want to see it keep going and you want it to keep growing, we would love your support. Every dollar helps in these early days, as you know, as a founder and as a business owner and as a mom. So if you've got any spare change and you want to contribute a cup of coffee our way, head to patreon.com/startuppregnant. The link will be in the show notes, as always. And it means a tremendous amount to us to have the support of so many of you already. We're trying to reach our goal to keep the mini episodes going. So go donate a cup of coffee, and thank you in advance from the bottom of my heart, because I love having these conversations and being able to bring this work into the world. Thank you so much for being a listener of the show. A few more things before we end this episode. First, if you know of a woman or a friend that would benefit from this show, send them a link to our website at startuppregnant.com. So many of you have already reached out and shared your stories, what this podcast is doing for you. And for that, I am so grateful. So if you know of somebody that would love to listen in, or you think that these stories would really hit it home for somebody, feel free to send it along. Second, if you've got a story that you need to share or tell, head over to startuppregnant.com and send us a note. We have had so much reader mail already, and your stories mean the world to us. We are proudly listener-sponsored, so if you want to sponsor the show and hear more episodes, head over to our Patreon page and you can buy us a cup of coffee, or 2 or 3. We'll take many cups of coffee. If you want any of the show notes or links from this particular episode, all of the references and tools and tips that we talk about are always posted on startuppregnant.com. Thanks so much for listening, and I will see you on the next episode.